I had a pocket watch, handed down from my great-grandfather, who worked on the last stretch of the Great Transcontinental Railroad. He was there, according to family legend, when they hammered home the golden spike. I took the watch out and dangled it under Blocker's face on its chain. "See this?" I said. "Worth $600, maybe $700. This a bribe?" Blocker laughed again. A great old laugher was he. "Man, I heard of people making deals with the devil, but you're the first one I ever met who wanted to bribe himself into hell." Now he looked at me with something like compassion. "You may think you understand what you're trying to get yourself into, but I am here to tell you that you don't have the slightest idea. In July, I seen it go to 117 degrees out there west of Indian Springs. Makes strong men cry. And you ain't strong, Bubba. I don't have to see you with your shirt off to know you ain't got nothing on your rack but a few yuppie health club muscles, and they won't cut it out in the big empty." I said, "The day you decide I can't cut it, I'll walk off the job, and you keep the watch. No argument." "You're a fucking liar." I looked at him. He looked back for some time. "You're not a fucking liar." He said this in tones of amazement. "No." "You'd give the watch to Tinker to hold?" He cocked his thumb at a humongous black man in a tie-dyed shirt who was sitting nearby in the cab of a bulldozer, eating a fruit pie from McDonald's and listening. "Is he trustworthy?" "You damn tootin'." "Well, then he can hold it until you tell me to take a hike, or until I have to go back to school in September." "And what do I put up?" I pointed to the employment application in his fist. "Sign that," I said. "That's what you put up." "You're crazy." I thought of Dolan and Elizabeth and said nothing. "You'd start on shit work," Blocker warned. "Shoveling hot patch out the back of the truck into potholes. Not because I want your damned watch, although I'll be more than happy to take it, but because that's where everyone starts. All right? As long as you understand, Bubba." "I do." "No," Blocker said. "You don't. But you will." And he was right. I remember next to nothing about the first couple of weeks. Just shoveling hot top and tamping it down and walking along behind the truck with my head down until the truck stopped at the next pothole. Sometimes we worked on the strip, and I'd hear the sound of jackpot bells ringing in the casinos. Sometimes I think the bells were just ringing in my head. I'd look up and I'd see Harvey Blocker looking at me with that odd look of compassion, his face shimmering in the heat baking off the road. And sometimes I'd look over at Tinker, sitting under the canvas parasol which covered the cab of his dozer, and Tinker would hold up my great-granddad's watch and swing it on the chain so it kicked off sun flashes. The big struggle was not to faint, to hold on to consciousness no matter what. All through June I held on, and the first week of July, and then Blocker sat down next to me one lunch hour while I was eating a sandwich with one shaking hand. I shook sometimes until 10 at night. It was the heat. It was either shake or faint, and when I thought of Dolan, I somehow managed to keep shaking. "You still ain't strong, Bubba," he said. "No. But like the man said, you should have seen the materials I had to start with." "I keep expecting to look around and see you passed out in the middle of the roadbed, but you keep not doing it. But you gonna." "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are. You stay behind the truck with the shovel, you gonna." "No." "Hottest part of the summer's still coming on, Bubba. Tink calls it cookie sheet weather." "I'll be fine." He pulled something out of his pocket. It was my great-granddad's watch. He tossed it in my lap. "Take this fucking thing," he said, disgusted. "I don't want it." "You made a deal with me." "I'm calling it off." "If you fire me, "I'll take you to arbitration," I said. "You sign my form. I ain't firing you," he said and looked away. "I'm gonna have Tink teach you how to run a front-end loader." I looked at him for a long time, not knowing what to say. My third-grade classroom, so cool and pleasant, had never seemed so far away. And I still didn't have the slightest idea of how a man like Blocker thought, or what he meant when he said the things he said. I knew that he admired me and held me in contempt at the same time, but I had no idea why he felt either way. "And you don't need to care, darling," Elizabeth spoke up suddenly inside my mind. "Dolan is your business. Remember Dolan." "Why do you want to do that?" I asked at last. He looked back at me then, and I saw he was both furious and amused. But the fury was the emotion on top, I think. "What is it with you, Bubba? What do you think I am?" "I don't." "You think I want to kill you for your fucking watch? Is that what you think?" I'm sorry." "Yeah, you are. Sorriest little motherfucker I ever saw." I put my great-granddad's watch away. "You ain't never gonna be strong, Bubba. Some people and plants take hold in the sun. Some wither up and die. You dying. You know you are. And you still won't move into the shade. Why? Why are you pulling this crap on your system?" "I've got my reasons." "Yeah, I bet you do. And God help anyone who gets in your way." He got up and walked off. Tinker came over, grinning. "You think you can learn to run a front-end loader?" "I think so," I said. "I think so, too," he said. "Old Blockhead there likes you. He just don't know how to say so." I noticed. Tink laughed. "Tough little motherfucker, ain't you?" "I hope so," I said. I spent the rest of the summer driving a front-end loader, and when I went back to school that fall, almost as black as Tink himself, the other teachers stopped laughing at me. Sometimes they looked at me out of the corner of their eyes after I passed, but they'd stopped laughing. "I've got my reasons." That's what I told him, and I did. I did not spend that season in hell just on a whim. I had to get in shape, you see. Preparing to dig a grave for a man or a woman may not require such drastic measures. But it was not just a man or a woman I had in mind. It was that damned Cadillac I meant to bury. By April of the following year, I was on the State Highway Commission's mailing list. Every month I received a bulletin called Nevada Road Signs. I skimmed most of the material, which concerned itself with pending highway improvement bills, road equipments that have been bought and sold, state legislature actions on such subjects as sand dune control and new anti-erosion techniques. What I was interested in was always on the last page or two of the bulletin. This section, titled simply The Calendar, listed the dates and sites of roadwork in each coming month. I was especially interested in sites and dates followed by a simple four-letter abbreviation. RPAV, that stood for repaving, and my experience on Harvey Blocker's crew had showed me that these were operations which most frequently called for detours. But not always. No, indeed. Closing a section of road is a step the Highway Commission never takes unless there is no other choice. But sooner or later, I thought, those 4 letters might spell the end for Dolan. Just 4 letters, but there were times when I saw them in my dreams. RPAV. Not that it would be easy, or perhaps even soon. I knew that I might have to wait for years, that someone else might get to Dolan in the meantime. He was an evil man, and evil men live dangerous lives. 4 loosely related vectors would have to come together like a rare conjunction of the planets. Travel for Dolan, vacation time for me, a national holiday, and a 3-day weekend. Years, maybe. Or maybe never. But I felt a kind of serenity, a surety that it would happen, and that when it did, I would be prepared. And eventually, it did happen. Not that summer, not that fall, and not the following spring. But in June of last year, I opened Nevada road signs and saw this in the calendar. July 1st through July 22nd tentative, US 71, mile 440 to 472 westbound, RPAV. Hands shaking, I paged through my desk calendar to July and saw that July 4th fell on a Monday. So here were 3 of the 4 vectors, and surely there would be a detour somewhere in the middle of such an extensive repaving job. But Dolan, what about Dolan? What about the 4th vector? 3 times before, I could remember him going to L.A. during the week of 4th of July, a week that is one of the few slow ones in Las Vegas. I could remember 3 other times when he had gone somewhere else, once to New York, once to Miami, and once all the way to London. And a 4th time when he had simply stayed in Vegas. If he went, was there a way I could find out? I thought on this long and hard, but 2 visions kept intruding. In the first, I saw Dolan's Cadillac speeding west towards L.A. along US 71 at dusk, casting a long shadow behind it. I saw it passing detour ahead signs, the last of the morning CB owners to turn off their sets. I saw the Cadillac passing abandoned road equipment, bulldozers, graders, front-end loaders. Abandoned not just because it was after knocking off time, but because it was a weekend, a 3-day weekend. In the second vision, everything was the same, except the detour signs were gone. They were gone because I had taken them down. It was on the last day of school when I suddenly realized how I might be able to find out. I had been nearly drowsing, my mind a million miles away from both school and Dolan, when I suddenly sat bolt upright, knocking a vase on the side of my desk. It contained some pretty desert flowers my students had bought me as an end-of-school present, to the floor where it shattered. Several of my students, who had also been drowsing, also sat bolt upright, and perhaps something on my face frightened one of them, because a little boy named Timothy Urich burst into tears, and I had to soothe him. Sheets, I thought, comforting Timmy. Sheets and pillowcases, and bedding and silverware, the rugs, the grounds. Everything has to look just so. He'll want everything just so. Of course, having things just so was just as much a part of Dolan as his Cadillac. I began to smile, and Timmy Urich smiled back, but it wasn't Timmy that I was smiling at. I was smiling at Elizabeth. School finished on June 10th that year. 12 days later, I flew to Los Angeles. I rented a car and checked into the same cheap hotel I had used on other occasions. On each of the next 3 days, I drove into the Hollywood Hills and mounted a watch on Dolan's house. It could not be a constant watch. That would have been noticed. The rich hire people to notice interlopers, because all too often they turn out to be dangerous, like me. At first there was nothing. The house was not boarded up. The lawn was not overgrown, heaven forbid. The water in the pool was doubtless clean and chlorinated, but there was a look of emptiness and disuse all the same. Shades pulled against the summer sun, no cars in the central turnaround, no one to use the pool that young man with ponytail cleaned every other morning. I became convinced it was a bust. Yet I stayed, wishing and hoping for the final vector. On the 29th of June, when I had almost consigned myself to another year of watching and waiting and exercising and driving a front-end loader in the summer for Harvey Blocker, if he would have me again, that was, a blue car marked Los Angeles Security Services pulled up at the gate of Dolan's house. A man in a uniform got out and used a key to open the gate. He drove his car in and around the corner. A few moments later, he came back on foot, closed the gate, and relocked it. This was at least a break in the routine. I felt a dim flicker of hope. I drove off, managed to make myself stay away for nearly 2 hours, and then drove back, parking at the head of the block instead of the foot this time. 15 minutes later, a blue van pulled up in front of Dolan's house. Written on the side were the words, Big Joe's Cleaning Service. My heart leapt up in my chest. I was watching in the rearview mirror, and I remember how my hands clamped down on the steering wheel of the rental car. 4 women got out of the van, 2 white, 1 black, 1 Chicana. They were dressed in white like waitresses, but they were not waitresses, of course. They were cleaning women. The security guard answered when one of them buzzed at the gate and unlocked it. The 5 of them talked and laughed together. The security guard attempted to goose one of the women, and she slapped his hand aside, still laughing. One of the women went back to the van and drove it into the turnaround. The others walked up, talking amongst themselves as the guard closed the gate and locked it again. Sweat was pouring down my face. It felt like grease. My heart was trip-hammering. They were out of my field of vision in the rearview mirror. I took a chance and looked around. I saw the back doors of the van swing open. One of them carried a neat stack of sheets. Another had towels. Another had a pair of vacuum cleaners. They trooped up to the door, and the guard let them inside. I drove away, shaking so badly that I could hardly steer the car. They were opening the house. He was coming.